Hi guys, so today we're going to look at kind of a combination of lessons 7 and 8 using the quadratic formula and completing the square. So it's really important to understand how these relate to each other. The quadratic formula and completing the square both achieve the same purpose. They both get you the roots or the x values for a quadratic equation. When it can be used anytime, but they're useful when your roots are irrational. So you could use them when something's factorable and the roots are not irrational, but particularly when the roots are irrational, when you can't factor for whatever reason. And they both get you the same answer. So for example, if we looked at the quadratic equation, x squared minus plus 6x minus 1 equal to 0. I'm going to ask you tonight to solve this problem twice. Once using quadratic formula and once by completing the square. Okay, so you should get the same answer. Using quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Your a, b, and c values should be identified first. A is 1, because your coefficient here is 1. B is 6, c is negative 1. So you're going to go x equals negative b is negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared would be 6 squared minus 4 times a is 1 times c is negative 1 all over 2a, 2 times 1. X equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. And then I have two negatives, so it'll be plus 4 all over 2. X equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 40 all over 2. This then becomes you set up two problems. Just scroll down. When you set up two problems, you go, okay, so either x equals negative 6 plus the square root of 40, all of that divided by 2, or x equals negative 6 minus the square root of 40, all of it divided by 2. So if I do negative 6 plus the square root of 40, remember to hit equals, and then divide that by 2, I get to the nearest tenth, let's say, 0.2. It was 0.162, but that rounds up to 0.2. And then negative 6 minus the square root of 40 equals divided by 2 gives me negative 6.2. These are my two roots. Okay, then I'm going to ask you to solve the problem again, only this time by completing the square. So you're going to take that same quadratic equation, slide down, x squared plus 6x minus 1. I think I have to go to a new page. Okay. Or not. Here we go. X squared plus 6x minus 1. Okay, so x squared plus 6x minus 1 equal to 0. Now by completing the square. So to complete the square, you take the c value and you move it over to the right side. I now have x squared plus 6x equals 1. You take half of the b value, which is 6, divide it by 2, take half of it and square it. So that's going to be 3 squared, which is 9. This 9 gets added to both sides. You now have, and I'm unable to scroll this page. All right, I'm going to do this. You now have x squared plus 6x plus 9 equal to 10. Remember that this left side will always be a perfect square trinomial. So it gets rewritten as a binomial squared. So x plus 3 squared is x squared plus 6x plus 9. And then you take the square root on both sides to isolate x. You now have, I have to move this up again. Sorry, guys. I don't know why it's breaking up all my stuff like this. I'm going to go over to this side. So we're going to take the square root. These cancel. I now have, I'll switch to blue so you can see it. I have x plus 3 equal to positive or negative square root of 10. I now subtract 3, and I write this as x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 10. So this breaks up into two problems, negative 3 plus the square root of 10, negative 3 minus the square root of 10. When you do negative 3 plus the square root of 10 on your calculator, you get the same exact answer you got when you did the problem using quadratic formula. You get 0.16, which rounds to 0.2. And then when you do negative 3 minus the square root of 10, you get negative 6.16, again, which is negative 6.2, just like you did doing the quadratic formula. So this is just like a good exercise to practice both of the skills, quadratic formula and completing the square, but also for you to see that they really do the same thing. They both give you the roots when they give you the roots no matter what, but you use them when you can't factor, when the roots are irrational. Okay? So each exercise you should get the same answers and practice both ways of doing the problem. Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to do this on the new page. X squared plus 6x